So does the place that you work or the environment that you work in actually set you up for failure? Have you ever really thought about this, and what have you done to change it? That is what productivity problem number 3 is all about. It's about failure work environments versus ideal work environments. So what does that exactly mean? Let's get into it. All right, so ideal work environments versus failure environments. What do I mean by that? So when you think about failure environments, there's sort of 4 main categories of what that means. The first one is having a workplace versus a social club or, some kind of social environment. Now, we all want to work with people that we like. It's great when you walk into work and everybody gets along and you can chat about what happened over the weekend and, your friends or, work friends at least with the people that you work with. I mean, it's nice to like each other. But the problem is, especially if you're the business leader, about setting the tone of what that means for productivity. Because if your workplace is all about everybody's IMing each other constantly, sitting around with a cup of coffee, chit-chatting, and tons of time is being spent like getting to know each other, getting along and all of that, it's great, but at the same time, it's really not. In fact, it's horrible for productivity. So make sure that you actually, when you have a workplace, that it is a workplace and not just a social club. Secondly, and along that same line is really about interruptions. Interruptions. Oh my gosh, it is such a big deal in the workplace, especially in corporate. Oh my gosh. So for those of you in corporate, you know what I mean. But even in small business environments and or for entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. So when I say interruptions, we're talking about atmospheres that are really not conducive to focus, getting in and focusing and getting things done. Now, this has been a huge thing for me to really think about this topic and to work on it, because one of the things that I've done is I realized at some point over the last couple of years that when I was in my actual office, so, I have my own business, I have an office that my team comes to every single day. So I'm not like the, work from home online entrepreneur. I actually have an office. But I realized that when I was going into the office, that I was the interruption. I was the distraction. And what was happening, and what does happen, whenever I go into the office, my team is constantly knocking on my door, coming into my office. They want to ask me questions, et cetera, et cetera. Or also, I become the distraction because I get an idea. Now I have an idea and I want to talk about the idea. And I'm like, hey guys, come in and let's talk about my next idea. Because that is what I do. I like to talk about my ideas. And so I'm a distraction to them. So one of the things that I had to realize was, first of all, I had to set rules around interruptions that we all have to abide by. And this was something that I came up with my team. And one of the things is that you don't just come into my office and interrupt me ever unless it's an emergency and you have to interrupt me right at that minute. If I'm working on something and you have a question that you need to know but you don't need to know it right this minute, you send me an email, you IM me, even if you're only 10 feet away. That's so that you don't interrupt my productive flow of thought. And also the same thing happens for my other team members where we just don't do that kind of thing to each other. Another thing is that we have what are called buffer days. This is something that I got from one of my business coaches, Dan Sullivan, strategic coach, where we all have days in my office where either we don't go into the office or we very consciously know that that person is off limits for the whole day as if they are not there in the office. And so the whole point of those types of days is to allow somebody to sit down, head down, get the work done, and not to have any impeded flow of productivity. Because when you have this sort of open door policy in your office and everybody has an open door policy, the reality of the matter is really not much of anything is getting done. We want to close that door with rules in ways that everybody knows that there's still access and we can still talk to one another, but that we are not free to just interrupt each other. Now, The third productivity problem is workplace conflict. Now, in relation to failure environments. So what I mean by workplace conflict in relation to failure environments is that we're not necessarily talking about workplace violence. We're not talking about beating each other up. We're not talking about, getting into shouting matches and screaming matches, although that can happen, of course. But, for most of us, that's just not the reality. Like, people are not walking around trying to beat each other up or getting in screaming matches at our jobs, or at least I hope that's not your workplace, because if it is, like, exit stage left right now. But workplace conflict actually encompasses a lot more than that, in my view. And it literally is, if you dread going into work every single day, or if you dread dealing with certain people at your work, whether it's team members or your boss or however it is, if you dread putting up with somebody, dealing with somebody, or just going into a certain place, that's conflict. That's workplace conflict. It's a different type of workplace conflict, but it's a kind of workplace conflict that has serious impact on your productivity. Because if you don't want to, I don't want to say if you don't want to be there, because for most people, they don't necessarily want to be at work ever. Some of us are lucky enough that we do want to be at work all the time, or enjoy being at work. But even if you don't want to be at work, it's not really that. It's that you literally dread it. Like, it literally makes you sick to think of going there. I had one team member that the job that she had before coming to work with me, she would go to work and she'd be crying the whole way to work because she was so stressed out about going into her workplace. That's conflict, if you ask me, right? I mean, that sounds like conflict to me. That's internal conflict, but it certainly is conflict. And so think about what this does to you in terms of your productivity. If you're trying to avoid people, if you don't want to be there, that means you're mentally checked out. You're not dealing with people that you might need to deal with in order to get the things done that you need to be getting done in your work. And this is having so much impact on your productivity, and it's very negative for you. And so how do you change that? All right, the fourth aspect of failure environments is really having an absence of resources. So, sort of the ridiculous yet, I hope very understandable example of what absence of resources might mean is, let's say that you came into work and somebody said to you, all right, I need you to type up all this stuff and here's a typewriter. Would you be like, what are you talking about? Of course, like, working on a typewriter in today's world would be a major productivity problem because, of course, using the computer with your word processing software would be so much better for productivity, right? And so if you're old enough to remember working on a typewriter, you know exactly what I mean. Some of you might not be. And so that's sort of a sillier example, but one that makes sense, right? Another example, though, is something, I was trying to think, like, what's an example that's actually happened in my work? So in my office, we very often have to modify PDFs, okay? And what was happening was I was being cheap and I didn't want to spend the money on PDF software that you could actually use to very easily modify the PDF. It's like a couple $100. I don't even know how much it is anyway. But I just remember that my team was like, we need this. And I was like, oh, we don't need to spend the money. There's these free things. But then one day I really realized, based on something that was happening, I don't remember what, that my team was actually spending a lot of time doing these workarounds to modify these PDFs. And then it just occurred to me, like, how much money am I spending every single time my team member has to do a workaround for this PDF software? They don't have the resources they need to be productive in their job. Buy the software, Nicole, give them the resources, and now they're going to be way more productive. And then that's what I did. So you can think of things where, if you're the entrepreneur or you're the business leader, that are you providing the right resources for your team or even yourself? Or are you doing like sort of these crazy elaborate workarounds related to resources that if you just went out and bought the tool or spent the time on learning the thing, or actually, just did it, that you would have immediate productivity returns, and then over the course of time have massive productivity returns. Productivity is money, people. let's get the money in the pockets. So that's all the things that I have to say today related to failure environments and how they affect your productivity. Let's move on to the next